Are you seeing it now?
Yeah.
All right, so for the last two, we had agreed that we would do it together. So for organisms such as fleas, ticks, and mosquitoes that can transmit diseases, what are these called?
Vectors.
Vectors.
Correct. And I assume that this one is waterborne disease. Disease is transmitted by a water that contains germs, chemicals, or toxins. All right, so throughout the presentation, these terms, you just want to bear these in mind, and it's important that you have a good understanding of what they mean. So, understanding climate change. So, globally, annual average surface air temperature has increased by about 1 degree Celsius over the last century. Much of the blame lies with the emission of greenhouse gases, including carbon dioxide. The gas concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has increased beyond 400 parts per million, a level that was last reached 3 million years ago. The magnitude of climate change beyond the next few decades will depend primarily on the amount of greenhouse gases emitted globally. The effects of climate change on human health are significant, right? And these are some of the reasons why. So there's extreme heat, severe weather conditions, and of course, when you have severe weather conditions, thinking about a hurricane, for example, people are losing their homes, people are getting sick, cold, fever. And sometimes you might look and you say, oh, a little sickness, a little flu, people can easily get over that. But then there are some people with underlying sicknesses. And I'm pretty sure that after going through COVID, most of us realize how much when you have an underlying sickness, it weakens your ability to manage any kind of other sickness in addition to that. Air pollution is a huge problem because there are a lot of people, a lot of children actually born in the Caribbean with what's known as asthma. Any of you were born with asthma? No? So some people were born with asthma, and any little thing that is off in the air can trigger them having an asthma attack. Changes in vector ecology is extremely important, and what this means is that because the climate is changing, these organisms are now changing biologically as well. So sometimes they're getting more resistant to the different ways and means that we would have controlled that particular vector. Sometimes it is that because they're moving to different regions of favorable climate, the people in that region, they are not familiar with those kinds of vectors, so they don't even know where to begin with controlling the the the, the growth in population of these vectors to control the spread of the potential diseases. There are increasing allergens, water quality impacts, especially as it regards to sea level rise, because with sea level rise, you have saltwater intrusion. It's affecting crops globally, and it's also impacting, like for example, the land quality, the groundwater uh, reserves. And so you find that the groundwater, especially when places experience drought and they have to resort to getting water from the ground, it's so salty that they have to find some way to desalinate the water, which is expensive. Water and food supply impacts. So because there are implications as it regards to agricultural produce. It severely affects food security across the world. Environmental degradation, so that leads to a number of other things. It leads to more diseases being spread, air pollution, because when you have environmental degradation, then you have more landslides, people losing their homes, people at risk. Recently, the rain fell and there was a massive landslide and it blocked off a complete section of a road, and a community was basically isolated because of that. So let us think about this before we start the session fully. What are your initial thoughts on climate change? And what is the difference between weather and climate? Now, I know you might have been exposed to that. Weather, the day-to-day changes, while climate is really something, it's like the bigger picture, and weather is a smaller little glimpse of, thing that happens every day. And what has happened in the last 150 years to cause the climate to have higher average temperatures? And this is a question that a lot of our policymakers have to be taken into consideration in terms of what are we doing differently, right? And if we think about it, if we look around, we realize that, we have significantly higher economic activities happening. We are manufacturing, we are doing things on a much larger scale, we are driving more cars, we are, there are just so many new things that we've introduced to the earth that has ramped up the amount of greenhouse gases that we send out into the atmosphere, and this is of concern. So, temperature extremes lead to more health related deaths and medical visits for cardiovascular, kidney, and respiratory disorders. So, climate change influences human health and diseases in numerous ways. Because of climate change, some existing health threats will intensify and other new health threats will emerge. So, you'll see people with different kinds of diseases, you'll see people fainting because the place is just so hot. People are now going through severe dehydration and they don't even realize it because they are drinking water, and they're drinking the normal amounts of water. But because the place is so hot, your body is losing water at a rate that is much faster that you are replacing that liquid. So public health officials must look beyond just rising global temperatures to see the far-reaching effects of climate change on a community and its overall health, right? So urban heat islands combined with an aging population, and believe it or not, if you're in Jamaica, if you're in the Caribbean, our population is becoming more aging um, as we continue, because a lot of our young people are putting off having babies. So, combined with an aging population and increased urbanization, because a lot more high rises are going up, our small islands, you know, um, the heat is just protected, it's projected to increase the vulnerability of urban populations, right? The effects of milder winters will help to reduce harms associated with cold and snow, but the impact does not cancel out the effect of heat-related illnesses and deaths. So for some people, they are experiencing favorable weather conditions because they would have been so used to having snowstorms and the place being extremely cold. Now the place is getting a bit more livable for them, so it's fine. But for others, especially for us who were in the heat, and we have always been in the heat since day one, it's a bit different for us. For floods, increases in both extreme precipitation, and that is rainfall, and the total rainfall have contributed to increases in severe flooding events. Floods are the second deadliest of all weather hazards in the United States, according to research done. In fact, it's accounted for approximately 98 deaths per year, mostly due to drowning, because in the states when the heavy rain falls, the way that it floods is much different from here in the Caribbean, and so it is very much more severe um, than what they would have been used to. And usually after extreme precipitation events, hazards like waterborne diseases, outbreaks, and mold growth increase. Populations living in damp indoor environments experience higher rates of respiratory symptoms, as we mentioned before, the asthma and the respiratory tract infections. So wildfires, it has increased even here in the Caribbean. Whoa, wildfires have gotten out of hand. Long periods of record high temperatures are associated with droughts that contribute to dry conditions and drive wildfires in some areas. Wildfires contains particulate matter, carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxides, and various volatile organic compounds, and can significantly reduce air quality, both locally and in areas downwind of fires. Smoke exposure increases respiratory and cardiovascular hospitalizations and emergency room visits for asthma, bronchitis, chest pain, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and respiratory infections. So air pollution is another one. Climate change is projected to harm human health by increasing ground level ozone. And as we would have noted in the definitions, ozone at ground level can be toxic, right? So ground level ozone is associated with many health problems such as diminished lung function, increased hospital admissions and emergency room visits for asthma, and increases in premature deaths. And then, of course, there is allergens and pollen. Climate change will potentially lead to higher pollen concentrations and cause more people to suffer more health effects from pollen and other allergens. Pollen exposure can trigger various allergic reactions with symptoms like itchy eyes, runny nose, sneezing, cough, and congestion. Exposure to pollen has been linked to asthma attacks and increases in hospital admissions for respiratory illnesses. And so in continuing, I would have mentioned about food security already, the fact that many crop yields are predicted to decline because of the combined effects of climate change in terms of the changes in rainfall, severe weather events, and increasing competition from weeds and pests on crop plants. And of course, saltwater intrusion, livestock and fish production are also projected to decline. Prices are expected to rise in response to declining food production. And that's a rule of economics, right? So if something gets scarce, it means that the price of that item is going to be high, right? So food insecurity increases with rising food prices, resulting in hunger, malnutrition, or even obesity, as people usually turn to the lesser healthy options. It's so weird. Healthy food is the most expensive on the market, and the unhealthy options are the ones that are affordable. So diseases carried by vectors, the fact that climate is one of the factors that influence the distribution of diseases borne by vectors such as fleas, ticks, and mosquitoes, which spread pathogens that cause illnesses. So essentially, infectious disease transmission is sensitive to local small scale differences in weather, human modification of the landscape, the diversity of animal hosts, and human behavior that affects vector human contact, among other factors. Mental health is literally, an important thing to consider, and stress related disorders. Following disasters, mental health problems increase both among people with no history of mental illness and those at risk. For example, research demonstrated high levels of anxiety and post traumatic stress disorder among people after Hurricane Katrina would have destroyed their homes, causing floods and different severe damages that would have, traumatized these people. Other health consequences of intensely stressful exposures are also a concern, including preterm birth, low birth weight, and maternal complications. So, climate change is literally causing these implications. It's like a ripple effect. Food and waterborne diseases is also a concern, as the illnesses will continue to spread due to the higher temperatures and extreme rainfall events. So it is important that we build resistance against climate effects, right? And this is something that we can encourage our community around us, our family, our close friends, to build resilience against climate effects. Brace yourselves for climate change, right? So you want to identify the severity of climate impacts on vulnerable populations. So let us look at a community, for example. We're looking at how the community is the location of a community. If it's close to the sea, then we know that one of the potential implications is sea level rise, right? So they might experience extreme flooding, especially if there is an extreme rainfall event. Then you have to determine the effects of climate change. What are the different ways that climate change can affect a community or a group of people? Then you design interventions for the health impacts of greatest concern. So that's where you're going to look now to see what are the different diseases that these people might be um, exposed to whenever there is a flood event and all of that. And then you distribute a written plan for implementation. So it's either we're going to build something safe around the community so we reduce the impact of flood. We're going to ensure that medication that treats floodborne disease or waterborne diseases are readily available for those community members. And we're going to discuss and prepare an evaluation. We're going to discuss and edit the plan in a sense. So evaluate the effectiveness of the plan to see if it's something that can work. Any interventions should consider the needs of these communities, as they are more likely to face the harm because of the changing climate. So let us think about these things. So, which people around the world will be the most vulnerable to the health effects of climate change and why? And I want you to think about it. I'm going to give you 5 minutes each, and you just write your answer in the chat. Think about number one. Which people around the world will be the most vulnerable to the health effects of climate change and why you think so? And then also think about in your community, which of the health effects of climate change presented do you think will have the greatest impact? So think about that, write the answer. There's no right or wrong answer. All right, so all right, awesome, awesome. I am loving the answers. So people who have respiratory diseases, such as those who were born with asthma and those who would have developed bronchitis, and then there, of course, the elders and newborns are people who would be most vulnerable as well. So let us, okay, so when I share this slide with you, you'll be able to watch this video because it's not playing. But the slide will be uploaded to the Google Classroom. And so for this slide, I want you to think about which health effects of climate change are you most interested in learning more about, and why does that topic interest you? And then for number three, do you think that environmental justice can be achieved in your country? So if you're in the United States, if you're in Jamaica, if you're in Trinidad, do you think that environmental justice can be achieved? I'll give you another 5 minutes to just reflect on those responses. And you can write the answers in the chat. All right, so just like last time, I'll give you guys 5 minutes to respond. So, which health effect of climate change are you most interested in learning more about, and why does the topic interest you? And third, the third question, what do you think that environmental justice can be achieved in your home country? Yes, and Shadika, about people who are less fortunate than others and don't have homes, completely agree with you. They are definitely the most vulnerable, one of the most vulnerable groups to climate change. Okay, awesome. So the time is up now. So foodborne and waterborne diseases, I'm curious about how you could stop such fix that. Yeah, that would be a very difficult task, but it's not impossible, especially with science. That is so true. The ignorance of citizens has been one of the underlying drawbacks of environmental justice. Yeah, diseases carried by vectors is another interesting topic, especially how it goes on to affect people with health issues. Yeah. And perhaps, while looking at that, can look at ways that, people can be helped in terms of strengthening their immune system to help to cope with those diseases. Yes, that is so true. Respiratory allergens is something, it's a good area to look into. And some of these areas, a lot of focus have not been given to them internationally or even locally. So it would be good for you guys to look into it. So, in order to understand how climate change affects health, it is essential that people understand how climate change occurs and what we do to protect vulnerable groups from its effects. You can help people by following these three steps. So, firstly, you want to measure the effects of a greenhouse gas. So, you can start by asking, how does the presence of carbon dioxide affect atmospheric temperature? You can do so by using bottles filled with air or carbon dioxide to see how temperature varies when the bottles are exposed to bright light. Two, you can research a health effect of climate change. So essentially, this will give you some background on the health issue and how climate change affects it, and you're able to basically share your findings with others. Your demonstration can help to communicate the effects and in turn reduce its effect as it pertains to health, right? So when you learn and you share, then you are able to help another. So let us use the scientific method when we are trying to solve anything at all, right? So you'll have identified the areas that you're interested in zoning into. So you want to ask a question, do the background research, think about your own hypothesis. What do you think is the answer to your own research question? Test with an experiment. So, for example, the bottle experiment with getting the air in the bottle, exposing it to bright light, and then feeling the temperature change in that bottle. And somehow you might feel, this is my hypothesis, that the bottle is hotter than the air outside, right? You can analyze your data, draw conclusions, and communicate your results. And as a scientist, as a young scientist, I want to urge you, anytime you conduct any kind of research, it is always important that you share those results with people. You'll be surprised to know how much research would have been done over the past 10, 20 years, and a lot of people have still not seen the results of those experiments that were conducted because they are not shared with the public. The production of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide is the main driver of climate change. For this experiment, you will be testing to see how different gases affect the temperature inside a bottle that is exposed to bright light. So you will be testing two atmospheres, one made of the normal air we breathe and another with a higher concentration of carbon dioxide. All right? So the materials that you need are two identical clear juice soda or water bottle. And let me get the information for you, or I'll post it on the Google Classroom so that you're able to do it. So you definitely are supposed to do the experiment. Um, the information will be in the slide. So you will set up the two plastic bottles with different atmospheres, one with normal and the other with more carbon dioxide. Expose both bottles to bright light and measure the temperature every 20 seconds. You can share your findings with the scientific community, and I'll show you how at the end. So choose one of the health effects of climate change, and you guys would have already selected the ones that you're interested in.
Oh, excuse me. Could you go back to the other slide, please?
No problem.
How would we get the other bottle with more carbon dioxide?
You can actually breathe into it because you remember you exhale carbon dioxide.
Uh-huh. And then the one with normal air, you just
Open it and close it. Yeah,
okay, thank you.
no problem. So infographics are extremely important tools to communicate your findings. So it's always important that you put them in a creative way to show people, especially in this day and age where a lot of people are more interested in reading a graphic than an actual science paper. So once it is that you have done the experiments and you are ready to share your findings, definitely send it to Dave Sensor. This is his Instagram page. Once you send it, they'll actually post it um, on their page to show your contribution to the scientific community. All right, and it's actually a big deal. Your name will be up and all of that. So definitely, between today and the weekend, try to get the experiment done and share it with Dave Sensor. All right, so we will be looking out to see your experiments. All right, so are there any questions?
Oh, when we do the experiment, we just send it to their Instagram?
Yeah, you send it to their Instagram, and you can also share it with us as well, so we can share on our Instagram as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you guys can probably do it over the weekend if you have the time over the weekend. And if you can even do it today, that would be great. So, yeah. All right. So, do you have any questions? Or the topic was clear?
Oh, I have one last question.
No
Um,
problem.
these are two different like things to do, right? Or is it under one? With the measure the effects of greenhouse gas and then research the health effects of climate change. Should it be in one or two different things?
Yeah, it would be, it can be two different things, or you can merge them, especially depending on the effect that you would have chosen. So, if you would have chosen something like, for example, um, the effect of heat waves, then you can definitely just merge it because then it's basically telling you the same thing that, greenhouse gases contribute largely to
Oh, okay.
increase in temperature, right?
All right.
So they are definitely related because it just shows you how an increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and of course we are not the main contributors, but the exhaust from cars, the exhaust from factories, and all of those other sources of carbon dioxide entering the atmosphere, those contribute to the reason why we have such a high temperature or why our temperature is increasing.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Any more questions? No? All right. So we are going to take a break now, and then you'll join us back at 12:30. So that's literally in another 2 hours for Dr. Romario Simpson's presentation. He'll be presenting on anatomy and physiology. So, and as biologists, those are that topic is very critical to your understanding and development. So see you guys at 12:30. You can log off or stay on, anyone you want to do. And yeah. And remember, you can invite your friends to join that session as well.
All right. Thank you. See you later.
All right.
Bye.
Bye bye.